that is one big family.
We are making the transition to a republic. This means no more king but a Jamaican president as head of state. One people, one republic, one Jamaica. The time by the MLCA is
1 o'clock.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans by justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice.
It's a very good Monday, and we're happy to be here with the Let's Start Justice program of Jamaicans for Justice. My name is Mikkel Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, Policy Research and Advocacy Manager at JFJ.
All right, so clearly the week that was centered on a free and fair democratic process in the country. And we're happy that, a couple of things happened that we ought not to take for granted in terms of our historical context and what is happening or has happened in other jurisdictions. I always maintain that in Jamaica, you can start knocking your pot covers from very early, right? And I know Nationwide called it at around 8 o'clock, I believe it was. So, to have a preliminary count on your election outcome is something we ought not to take for granted, right? I remember one country following, court challenges and so on, several months passed before you knew definitively who was in power. Again, we don't take these things for granted here in Jamaica. So free and fair election was held on September 3. And having said that, Jamaicans for Justice, we issued a press release extending our congratulations to the Jamaica Labour Party for securing its third term, the mandate of the people. And in that press release, we also extended our congratulations to the other political parties and independent candidates who participated and offered themselves up for service. And we note that there is greater parliamentary balance with the People's National Party securing what is now confirmed following the official count, which was concluded over the weekend, 35 seats for the JLP, 28 for the People's National Party. All right, so we extended that. And there are some things that we're looking forward to, Jade. One of them, we're going to be having a discussion in short order with Dr. Trevor Monroe, Professor Trevor Monroe, on electoral reforms, because in our release, we called for the resumption of the constitutional reform process with stronger bipartisan efforts, greater public consultation, and greater public education. Because if a referendum is to be held, I think the people must understand what exactly they're being asked to vote on. But beyond that, one of the things we're going to be discussing is that we need the constitutional reform process to look at fundamental and transformative changes. For example, the electoral reform, whether how we elect our political representatives are serving democracy and legitimacy of any government that is elected. The how is important. And we are looking for greater accountability to the people through the right to recall mechanisms, for example, and importantly, entrenchment of key institutions. And I know we spoke about looking forward to the cabinet, an energized cabinet that is reflective of, conservative number, but importantly, how that cabinet will see energy being put to some of the promises that the JLP put forward in its manifesto. I don't know if from the justice era, Jade, anything jumped out at you that you are saying to the government, once your cabinet is established, ensure that these things are done.
Well, one of the major things for me was the mediation, because I think we have all sort of moved into alternative dispute resolution culturally, in trying to resolve conflict. And I think that one of the challenges is that, in adapting this new technique, we may be applying it in places where it shouldn't be applied, or not applying it in places where it should be. And I think that having that mediation legislation would assist us in doing that proper application and also resolving a lot more issues without having to go to the court system and doing something so formal.
Yeah. And as you talk about justice, there is an article on the front page of the Jamaica Gleaner today where Chief Justice Brian Sykes is bemoaning the fact that, and I use the word fact here loosely, the issue, let me say that you have persons within gated communities, middle to upper class, not serving and leaving it to the working poor, who, will have challenges getting off to work. But, with respect, I think this is why we need the Jury Act to be reviewed, as was promised by the Minister of Justice. And remember, the executive branch is still in effect, right? You have MP elects. But it's something that needs urgent review, because you have people who have been paying their taxes, who have never actually been called for service. And how you get out of jury duty is something, again, that is worth probing through legislation and enforcement. So that is something I believe we ought to look to. And I know one of the conversations we should be talking about, and we said it in our in our press release, the opposition members know that you have 28. We need to go back to what former Prime Minister Bruce Golding had put in place, where you have opposition members serving as chair of those sessional committees, important for accountability. And the more numbers you have more diverse views serving on joint select committees. So again, we look forward to the new parliament, the new session term, coming into effect. And we have many more things. Access to Information Act, many other things. We look forward to the resumption of the Integrity Commission legislation. We look forward to the resumption of the Joint Select Committee reviewing the Protected Disclosure Act. Yes. So, many things.
Violence Act as well.
Oh my God, don't even get me started on that one.
Yeah.
Joint Select Committee established last parliamentary cycle, met only twice. If we're serious about domestic violence, we need to look on re-establishing that Joint Select Committee, so we can finally see a complete overhaul of the Domestic Violence Act and some of the things that govern it, right? So yes, we know that the government did well in establishing 2 shelters, and I believe a 3rd is underway, but the legislation itself needs comprehensive review.
Absolutely.
Right?
All right. Thank you for that, Mikkel. So we will go into our right of the day and or trivia question. So our did you know for today is on the registration of electors prescribed age special act. So this is the legislation that allows for us to vote at the age of 18. Prior to this legislation, which was the prior time was pre-1972, you could not vote in the election until you were 21. So now...
So universal adult suffrage, when all Jamaicans could vote, 1944 said age 21 and older. Yeah.
Exactly. So now we are able to vote from the age of 18 since the passing of this legislation in 1972. Our trivia question for today is another legislative question, but this one requires a specific answer. So which legislation makes provision for the election of the House of Representatives, and what date did it first come into place? I need the name of the legislation and I need the date that it came into place. That's day, month, year. So you can respond.
Day as well?
Yes.
Not even just month and year?
No.
They're turning people into scholars.
Absolutely. Well, the prize this week is a little bit better than normal, and so they have to work a little bit harder.
Okay. As you were reading, Jade, there are some utterances I see on social media that I think we have to be careful of. We're shunning and making derogatory classist comments about voters and who should vote based on what some deem to be social intelligence, rather. These are unnamed people, anonymous people, making derogatory comments about voters who stood in the line and exercised their democratic right. That only people with certain intelligence, and as you were reading that did you know and the trivia, I wonder if we recognize how far we've come as a country and that some comments ought not to be made, right? So, to those unnamed people who don't have the sense of bravery to put a face and full name to your profile, be careful of your utterances. It's quite distasteful, as a matter of fact. Classist comments that ought not to be made. Yeah.
Thank you, Mikhail. So while I ask Damien to try to get Professor Monroe for me, um, we've had 19 general elections, and we have been concerned about the mechanics of the first past the post system. And one of the issues, it's easy to understand and easy to count, but some people are concerned that it may not be achieving our democratic intentions.
Yeah, and to for those who have, I stood in my line. I went there. I left home at 6:40 a.m.
Yes.
with my coffee in hand, right? Because I'm prepared for the road to go and stand at my polling division to exercise my franchise, and I didn't leave until 8:20. So I was there pretty early, and I didn't get there until 8:20. But I would have been in that line much longer. Face would have vexed, but I would have been there. But there are a couple of things that you contemplate when you're exercising your right. For those of us who read the manifesto, or if you don't even read the manifesto, you follow what is on the news cycle and you pay attention to what's happening, and you look at the things that both political parties are saying. You're saying, all right, let me look at what is happening in my constituency. I have two potential candidates, or three or four, depending on whether you had a third political party. And you said, okay, who do I want to represent me at constituency level? Are they doing a good job? Do I think the other candidate is going to be better? So you're looking at your MP now. And then I said, boy, based on how we know we have our prime minister, it's nominated through the House.
Right.
And then the Governor General signs off on that. And then you ask yourself, no, but this party leader, whether Mark Golding or Dr. Holness, is that the person I want to be my prime minister? And then they say, okay, all right, I might like one or the two, but me not too like the political party. So there are a couple of things that we're faced with. Do we want to have a system where there is direct election for the prime minister? But the mixed member proportional system, it gives you two choices, and Prof is going to be walking us through. So I don't have to be struggling about a vote for my MP becomes a vote for the political party or becomes a vote for the potential prime minister. I should be able to have two distinct choices. MP, what is happening in the local constituency, and then the political party, who I said, boy, as a collective, I think you're better. And those are the choices we believe in a democratic society. Certainly what we put forward to in our constitutional reform document, listeners, is that we should be moving towards that. So we want Professor Monroe to explain it to the listeners. So Prof is now on. Good afternoon, Prof.
Good afternoon, Mikhail, and good afternoon, Jade. Good afternoon to your listeners.
Thank you so much for joining. Jade and I, when we were having the discussion, we said only Prof can break it down, because for those of us who are students of political science, we've read your books and we're guided by your thoughts, certainly.
Well, let me thank you for that compliment. But as you said in the opening remarks, we need public education.
Yes.
Because some of the issues are very complex, but also extremely fundamental. But before we get into that, I want to associate myself with your congratulatory comments at the beginning, both to the Prime Minister and the Jamaica Labour Party for their third term, and to the opposition leader and the opposition for a significantly strengthened parliamentary opposition.
Yes.
So I associate myself with you on that. But you raised the issue of the electoral system.
Yes.
And perhaps you might begin by pointing out that there are two basic forms of electoral system. The one that we have had in Jamaica since 1944, which is called the first past the post. And as the name indicates, you only get a seat in the parliament if you're able to pass the post first in a geographical constituency, what we call constituencies, others call by a different name. On the other hand, the other major electoral system is called proportional representation. And that is really designed to ensure that the percentage of votes received by a political party in an overall election is reflected in the percentage of seats that it receives, either in a special house, maybe an upper house, or in the overall parliament. And each of these, of course, as all systems, have their advantages and disadvantages.
Yes.
In our case, the first past the post has served us well. As you and others have pointed out, Jamaica was the first black country in the world to have gotten adult suffrage by virtue of people's struggles and the advocacy of civil society organizations in the 1940s. And we have had 19 elections since on that basis. And those have been relatively free and fair after some significant deficiencies, which our leadership and our country rallied to correct in the 1970s going into the 1980s. And we are, in effect, a model in terms of our electoral administration.
Prof, can you hold that thought for us,
Sure,
please? Sorry to cut you. Let's take the break.
It's Monday, get over your blues. Or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
The E-Zone is here for you.
With the Stinger Honey Bee.
And Curry Boyatings
From 3 to 5 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM.
We've got your entertainment news.
Then we want to hear your views. Why you say?
Jump in the mix.
Or the hot seat.
Don't miss our brain busters.
Or the crazy giveaways.
Let's talk fashion.
Send us your outfit of the day. Ooh, cutesy. Very demure.
Are you looking for love?
Come on one of our blind dates. Send your request to ezone blinddates@gmail.com. That's ezoneblindates@gmail.com.
And stay tuned for your confessions.
These are my confessions.
Share them with us at ezoneconfessions@yahoo.com. I mean, is this planet Earth?
Is it?
I don't know. Let me check. Either way, it's got a buzz.
And a bugger thing.
Ow! Ow!
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're discussing electoral reforms in Jamaica. And before the break, Professor Monroe, you were guiding us through the first past the post system and how that has served Jamaica well since we've been using the system.
Yes, and I was saying that along that route, we had some significant potholes and roadblocks, but happily our people and our leadership corrected and relatively smooth highway since that time. So that no longer, for example, Michael and Jade, can we be doing what was done prior to the late 70s and 80s, namely the majority party be able to draw constituency boundaries to suit itself, as is happening right now in the United States, where the majority seeking to redraw divisional boundaries, district boundaries as they call it, to facilitate the majority party. That's no longer possible in Jamaica so long as we preserve the independence of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. And of course, one of the things that you and I and others are advocating is that our Electoral Commission be actually given constitutional protection to put it away from any party that might be so misguided enough to say, let's abolish the ECJ or let's change it in a way that would allow what was going on before, manipulation of boundaries, to happen again. So we've managed to correct those deficiencies, and that is something that we need to commend ourselves on, but not be complacent about. But the first past the post system, despite its stability and the fact that it has contributed to successful free and fair elections over the past 19 occasions, has a particular deficiency in that the proportion of votes that the majority party receives, especially when the popular vote is very significantly in favor of the majority party, always disadvantages the party that comes second or the minority party. And I'll give you a simple example that in the, I think it was the 2000, the election that the JLP or the PNP won by a very, very significant margin. That would have been in, let us say, one in 1997, where the PNP got the popular vote of 56% rounded off. But the percentage of parliamentary seats it got was, guess what, 83%, which meant that the opposition JLP at the time, which got 39% of the popular vote, thereabouts, only got 17% of the parliamentary seats. And if you think about it, that's almost inherent in the first past the post system.
Yes.
Because theoretically, and just think about this theoretically, it's possible for a party to get 49% of the vote on the first past the post and get no seats at all. How? It would mean that in each of the constituencies, say 63 constituencies such as we have now, if the party that loses got 49% in each constituency, it would not have passed the post first in any of them.
Yes.
And therefore got no seats whatsoever. Of course, that's hypothetical and theoretical, but it has happened. I'm thinking of the Barbados election. They have a first past the post system in 2022, where the winning Barbados Labour Party got 69% of the seats. It passed the post, however, in 69% of the vote, but passed the post first in 100% of the seats. So
Yeah, because they got all 30.
All 30
Yeah.
seats. The Democratic Labour Party, which got, good over a quarter of those who voted for the Democratic Labour Party, ended up with no seats at all. So that's one of the issues that the first past the post has, where when there are significant parliamentary popular vote majorities, the party that loses is disadvantaged. Now, the proportional representation, and in particular the one that you referred to, mixed member representation, mixed member proportionality, the MMP, what that does is to combine proportional representation with the first past the post. And how does it do this? Some of the seats are constituency based and voted for by persons in each constituency. But there's a second set of seats, either in a second house or in the same house if you have a single house, single parliamentary chamber, which are distributed according to the proportion of votes received by the party. Now, what that means, that in every system of mixed member proportionality, each elector has two votes. One vote for the person you wish to represent you in the constituency, the geographical space, and another vote for the party that you wish to form the government.
Yes.
And that system has so many varieties that we'd have to take a whole day to explain it. But, for example, in Germany and Italy, where they have an MMP, mixed member proportionality, with two houses. And one house is elected on the basis of the constituency vote, and the other house, the membership is divided according to the party vote. How do you vote which party you vote for. So, for example, if you were to use a hypothetical case, because one of the challenges with the first past the post, based on what I just said, is that persons know, those who are voting know, that look, it don't make sense voting for any third or fourth party unless they can pass the post in one or another constituency.
Yes.
Because the vote will be, quote unquote, wasted. However, if you had a system where some of the seats in Parliament were allocated according to the proportion of votes received, then persons would say, but, you know, even if them can't win a seat in a constituency, if enough votes vote for them, them can still get a representation in Parliament. Let me give you a concrete example. In 1997, for the first time for a long time, a third party, the National Democratic Movement, gained a noted percentage of the vote. The PNP in that election got 56% of the popular vote. The JLP got 39% of the popular vote. And of course, as I said before, the seat count in the House was disproportionate to the actual popular vote,
Yes.
because the PNP got 50 seats and the JLP 10, despite 39% of the vote. But the MDM did manage to get 5% of the vote.
So they would have
In
met that
other words,
threshold.
They got 37,000 people voting for the National Democratic Movement.
Yes.
But because they didn't pass the post first in any geographical area, they got no seats at all. And then everybody said, boy, it don't make sense to go on with this thing because it not work. However, if we had a system, and it would be a fundamental change, where, for example, we retain the first past the post for the House of Representatives, but we had a Senate in which the seats were divided in proportion to the votes received and a minimum threshold, which usually is the case, of, say, 5%.
Yes.
We would have had a Senate of 12 PNP, 8 JLP, and 1 NDM. So in that case, persons would have been encouraged to say, well, look, if they had a bigger percentage of the popular vote beyond the 37,000, we could have gotten more seats in the Senate or in whatever area is reserved for proportionality. And that was one of the things that New Zealand, which is the case I like to look at most, though there are some significant aspects of it that I wouldn't necessarily support for Jamaica. After over 100 years of the first past the post system, they had a significant public education program, kind of public education that we haven't had in our constitutional review so far, explaining different systems and asking people to make up their mind based on explanations. And they shifted in a referendum in 1992. They changed to mixed member proportionality in 1996.
Yes.
They've had 10 elections since that time in which the houses, the seats in the parliament are divided according to constituency representation and also a list representation. So what that requires is not only that the political parties would put up a candidate in each of the constituencies, but they would also be required to put a list of persons, other than the candidates, who were they to receive a certain proportion of the vote, they would get a proportion of that list added to their parliamentary seats.
Yes.
And the example that we gave, NDM would have gotten that one seat in 1997 and perhaps encouraged the continuation of that party and the formation of other parties to ensure that more people would feel that they have a greater choice than the one that we've had and had to live with and actually vote for in the past many, many decades. So that's roughly it. It's, as I said, there are many different versions of the mixed member proportional system. I've simply mentioned one of them where we would retain the seats that exist now, the three, and as it is now, 60 as it was in 1997,
Yes.
but have a Senate either expanded in numbers or retain the same numbers, where there would be a list from which proportions members would be chosen based on the proportion of the vote that the party received. And this would represent quite a fundamental change, but we're looking at, hopefully, fundamental changes in our constitution to make our representatives more representative, to make them more accountable. And I really want to endorse your suggestion in the opening remarks for the right of recall, because while the advantage of the constituency representation is that you have somebody actually not just represented to make laws for the country as a whole, but to look after the circumstances of the people in their geographical area. But very often this doesn't happen, and you have no ability to change that under 5 years or until the next election.
Prof, hold that thought for me, because I want us to pick up on the other side of the break in terms of, the advantages and clarification in terms of the MMP being for House of Representatives or for Senate or both. So if you could just stay with us for a few more minutes, please.
Sure.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
33 degrees Celsius here in Kingston and 31 out west in Montego Bay.
Have you just finished grade 11? Looking for a 2-year sixth-form pathway to earn overseas local certificate diploma and advanced diploma and get qualified to work locally and internationally? Register now. Start free sixth form at IIRQ Academy. Start our new sixth form program online or face-to-face classes in September. Choose between pathway 1, 2, or 3. Paid for by the Ministry of Education. For more information, call 876-322-4029 or visit 32 Hope Road, Kingston. Website www.iirq.org.
Ever wondered how to spot a scam before it drains your account? Or how Jamaica's top financial crime fighters track down the money? Join the Financial Investigations Division on Nationwide this morning, every first and third Friday at 8:20 a.m. for FID in Action, an informative, engaging feature designed to keep you and your money safe. Learn practical tips to help you spot, prevent, and report financial crimes. Understand how the FID protects the financial system. That's FID in Action, protecting you, preventing financial crime. On Nationwide this morning, every first and third Friday at 8:20 a.m. Brought to you by the Financial Investigations Division.
All right, welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are discussing electoral reforms in Jamaica, and one of the proposals is mixed member proportional system or mixed member proportional representational system. So if you see those two terms, it's the same thing. But Prof, I wanted you to clarify because I'm just reading some comments in the chat and via WhatsApp. Specifically whether the MMP can work in both lower and upper house if you have a bicameral system, or whether the recommendation it's either or rather than both.
Well, the main thing that we want to do in the mixed system is to ensure that there is a significant number of seats based on constituencies.
Yes.
So that the individual constituency would have a representative that they would hold accountable, and if there was a right of recall, be able to call back within the 5-year term if they either broke promises or misbehaved themselves. So it wouldn't, if you wanted to, say, merge the Senate and the House and create one House in Jamaica. The New Zealanders moved from 2 houses to 1 House in 1996. Then we would have a 1 House Parliament of 81.
Yes.
Sorry.
No,
So we moved.
yeah.
We're 63, 84.
84. Not good at math,
So
sorry.
years ago, I was looking at that example. 63 plus 21. Okay.
Yeah, 84.
So if we are to follow the same example as we used a moment ago, then a certain percentage of that 84, and we're saying if we retain the 21 seat in terms of the merger from the Senate, then that percentage will be distributed on the basis of a list to ensure proportional vote reflects the actual distribution of seats in the parliament, the single house parliament. If you retain the 2 houses, then I think the best way to do it is to do one of the houses on the basis of the list rather than both, because that would then reduce the number of constituencies that we now have that would be based on geographical boundaries.
Yeah.
But as I said, the arguments for and against, the main thing that would have to be decided is in the course of making our constitution more democratic, and both leaders of the parties that are now represented in Parliament in their acceptance speeches spoke about the need to preserve and to strengthen the Jamaica's democracy, which means making our representatives more accountable, making our Parliament more effective in controlling the executive, and of course the issue that has bedeviled us since independence, and indeed at the time of independence was a major point of debate, reducing the element of prime ministerial power and making the prime minister, whoever that person may be from whatever party, more accountable to the people by the mechanisms that have been discussed and some indeed proposed and made commitments to, making sure that that person has term limits and cannot change the system by majority to serve indefinitely, and to make sure that that person doesn't have an absolute discretion to call an election within the 5-year period to suit his or her political party and without regard to the circumstances of uncertainty in relation to business and in relation to the people generally. So there are a number of proposals that would need, in my opinion, to be resubmitted to our people, but based on public education, because these are not easy issues, and you don't want a kind of nominal, superficial consultation where you're asking somebody to choose between first past the post and mixed member proportional, and I'm asking what kind of medicine that is, or which pharmacy sell that. I don't have any clue as to what it is. So it does need that fundamental educational foundation.
Yeah, I'm happy you said that, because these are not easy topics to even share information about, because we're here now and, we're trying to break down. Because one of the things, Prof, from me here and Jade, and we've had a discussion internally, it's almost like if you make one change, it doesn't work well without the other changes being made. So the changes are so complementary and fundamental with each other. For example, the right to recall. If we're going to be having these fundamental changes, it's almost like the right to recall must be there with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
that's so important, that it would have to be, and that's why the public education is so critical, which we really had a big effort and a substantial advance in that direction between 1992
yes.
and, over many joint select committees of Parliament, and which ultimately led to a really, really fundamental change in our Constitution, perhaps the only one since independence, and that is the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms,
yes.
which, gave us the right to a healthy environment, which we never had before, and also a right to ensure that no executive or parliament or any agency of the state could change or invade, erode, or abolish our fundamental rights unless it were consistent with a free and democratic society and therefore subject to oversight by our judiciary and our judicial system. So yes, it does take time and it does take a significant effort if we want to make the system more accountable and to make our people more empowered and not just symbolic but very important symbols. As you know, symbols are so important, but we wouldn't want to just become a republic with the same deficiencies in terms of the inability of our people to exercise accountability over our elected representatives and with the levels of opaqueness and the absence of adequate transparency to know what is being done, when it is being done. For example, once upon a time we used to know, up until recently actually, who was getting which contract.
Yes, yes.
Up until 2020, now we have no idea of contracts being awarded to who and to which entities. And as you had pointed out in your introductory remarks, up until, again, recently, the Bruce Golding innovation, so very, very important, of having the sessional committees of Parliament all chaired by opposition members, was significant in ensuring that there was a deep and probing examination of how different ministries, departments, and agencies were working. So these are the kinds of interlinks that would make the kind of constitutional reform that Jamaican people want and give them a sense of, look, it does make sense for us, more of us to vote, because when we vote, that's not the end of it. After the vote, we're going to be able to make sure that those whom we put there do what they say they will do, or we will have a way of removing them if they misbehave.
Yes, and that way shouldn't necessarily come by way of a public demonstration. The system should be there to ensure that there is the accountability that we're talking about.
And one of our rights, of course, would be the public demonstration, but invariably, if we have those other mechanisms, that's our last resort, so to speak.
Yes.
So we could do so many other things to get the information, get rid of the Official Secrets Act, which is used to intimidate so many public servants. If they see wrong and want to talk about it, they're being reminded that they're bound by the Official Secrets Act, which makes no sense when you have an Access to Information Act. So these are kinds of changes I think would really enhance the system that we have preserved and we need to strengthen, as our leaders have said they wish to do.
Where do we go from here, Prof? Because it seems as if it's a small number of people talking to each other. And, you know, I made a little post pre-election on this, and, the public swiftly responded, not interested in anything like that. Let's keep the current system as is. So how do we move forward with public education on a topic that's so difficult from your experience?
Yeah, I think, first of all, that we need to do more to remind our public of occasions on which they decided, look, we don't think this is right, we're not going to put up with it. And they spoke out and stood up and got some results, maybe not a full result, but a partial result. Because, so many people believe, well, so the thing set, so the system stay, we can't do nothing about it. Or alternatively, they are so preoccupied as times are difficult with making two ends meet that they don't think it makes sense to spend time doing anything else without understanding that one of the reasons why things are so hard has to do with issues that you could change if you spoke out more and stood up more. And there's so many, examples when people have spoken out and stood up, particularly our professional associations or civil society organizations, the man in the street in terms of the call-in programs and TV interviews, which the politicians do monitor very, very carefully. I mean, I think of the issue of cabinet papers, where there was a proposal, a serious proposal put before the Parliament that cabinet papers which are involved in summarizing decisions made on behalf of us, the people, would no longer be secret for 30 years, but would be secret for 70 years.
70, yes.
the Press Association, the Media Association, and I believe JFJ, everybody said, no. And that had to be withdrawn. And there are many other examples of this. Some was not so much related to governance, but related to issues that people feel strongly about. I remember when we were going to have a festival song, because the authorities felt that the entries weren't up to standard, and the people said, no, a festival song, and we had a festival song competition. So I think we need to be making ourselves learn from experience more, our own experience, that look, if things are really not what we want them to be, we really can make a difference if enough voices speak out and enough of us stand up, using the freedoms that we have won over so many decades of hard struggle, not least of all the freedom to speak. We rank highly in the world in terms of the freedom of the press, and we need to guard that against any kinds of incursion. And the freedom to assemble, the freedom to demonstrate. I know there's a fear of victimization that has been with us for decades. If you stand up and speak out and do so in a manner that exposes yourself, you can be victimized, and that's true. But there are so many other ways that you can speak out. I mean, the 311, where we can call in and say what we see in terms of weapons and illegal activity, protects you, but does and has demonstrated that an impact can be made. So let's use the freedoms we have to talk more about how the changes that you and I have been discussing could help to make people's lives better. But that's ultimately where people want to see, how can my life be improved if I had greater say over what those we have elected or those who are set over us do. And that's something that we can do more about, but it's going to take a lot of explaining and demonstration in words of when we took a stand, it made a difference, because that's one of the main things. People don't feel if you talk about it going to make any difference at all.
Yeah, beautifully said. All right, thank you so much, Prof. Really appreciate you, coming on the program and explaining and breaking down these proposals that we discussed.
And thank you so much, Michael and Jade and JFJ. You keep up the good work, and those who have resources listening to us know that JFJ and IA and all of us need resources to do more to help Jamaica become the Jamaican that we all want it to be. All the very best to you.
All right, have a good day. All right, bye-bye. All right, that was Professor Trevor Monroe discussing the mixed member proportional system. We take the break, and Jade and I will finish out.
Do you have a consumer-related issue? Want to learn more about matters concerning you as a consumer? Well, keep it locked to Nationwide 90 FM for the Consumer Hour with me, Nora Gay Banton, weekdays from 9 to 10 a.m. For all your consumer-centric matters, stay tuned to the Consumer Hour on Nationwide 90 FM, a revolution in media.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We just had a very, very good discussion with Professor Trevor Monroe on mixed member proportional system. And we have former Prime Minister Bruce Golding on the call. Mr. Golding, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
We're doing well. Thank you so much. And I hope the same from your end.
Yes, but I'm fine.
Great.
No, I just wanted to add an observation to the discussion.
Yes.
The issues relating to constitutional reform that have been talked about is the question of having fixed election dates. It is something that I sought to implement when I was in office. It is something that the Prime Minister himself had given a commitment to. And it was raised, he was challenged on it during the debate. And he did allude to the fact that there were some constitutional obstacles, but he didn't elaborate.
Yes.
And I just wanted to try and provide some clarity. The question of a fixed election date has to do with the provision in the Constitution which says, and I'm quoting from Section 64, subsection 1, the Governor General may at any time, by proclamation published in the Gazette, prorogue or dissolve Parliament. Now, that section is not entrenched, which means that a government with this majority could amend that.
Yes.
But here we run into a problem. When you get down to subsection 5, it says, in the exercise of his powers under this section, which means Section 64, all of Section 64, the Governor General shall act in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister. Now, the problem that I ran into in 2010, I think it was when I tried to implement it, is that subsection 5 is not just entrenched, which means it's not just something that could be amended by a two-thirds majority. It is deeply entrenched, which means that in addition to the two-thirds majority in both houses of Parliament, it has to go to the people in a referendum.
Yes.
So I wanted to point out the Prime Minister, perhaps because of the shortness of time, did not elaborate. But the problem is that you can't have a fixed election date unless you amend Section 64, subsection 5, which says that the Governor General shall act in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister with regard to the prorogation of the dissolution of Parliament. And Parliament has to be dissolved if elections are to be held. So I just wanted to make that point. And that subsection is deeply entrenched, which means that it has to go to the people in a referendum.
You know, I'm happy you said that because I personally have read and listened to you speak now on Section 49.
Yes.
And the ease at which, without undermining the provision, that we perhaps need to look at how to introduce new protections in the Constitution. And
yes, it is too rigid.
Yes.
Much too rigid.
Rigid and confusing.
You have sections, for example, that can be amended by a two-thirds majority in both houses of Parliament. But in order for it to introduce a section that would be amended by the two-thirds majority, you have to amend Section 49. And in order to amend Section 49, you have to have a referendum.
Yes.
So it is much too tight. And one of the things that I suggested in the constitutional reform process is for us to look at that and to loosen it up a bit, not to open a floodgate, but to make it possible that where a two-thirds majority is required, that a two-thirds majority would be enough to amend that section of the 9.
Yes.
But that is something that will be taken whenever we get back to the business of constitutional reform.
Yes, thank you so much, because we made that recommendation, and I'm happy to say that though we have to do some perhaps restarting, Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, she did ensure that a similar provision was in the bill.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but thank you so much.
Good, thank you very much.
Really appreciate you calling in.
Right, bye-bye.
So that was our former Prime Minister, Bruce Golding, making some clarification or expounding on the point that Dr. Andrew Holness had raised in the debates, which, people had called for some clarification. Because when I heard the statement, I was wondering what exactly Dr. Holness was alluding to. So I'm quite happy for that clarification being made, because I was of the thought that, this is a constitutional process. So what amendment, what hurdle was being, that couldn't be fixed in the amendment process itself. So yeah, but you see how this thing, Jade, I don't know. It needs a lot because there are a lot of legalities and nuances. Clearly,
Yeah.
it's our supreme law. But for the public to perhaps sufficiently understand and appreciate the issues, it's important for this type of dialogue to always be had. But it's the whole.
Yeah.
Because I can say I was privy to political science, and as Mr. Golding calling, I was privy to also hearing him speak at UWI
Yes,
when I was there. And to listen to the words, you don't always agree with the perspectives, but the thought process and the reasoning behind it, I wish more of us were privy. You did your law, but so.
No, but I agree with you that it's a different animal, because even as someone who I thought prior to going into constitutional reform was fairly well read. I thought I was fairly well read.
Until you start looking at it in different...
Right. When I started looking at constitutional reform and looking at how nuanced it could be, because all of the time before, I really only considered the constitution from the perspective of rights.
Mm-hmm.
So once we started looking at the structures and the systems that are in place to pass the laws, to set up the parliament, to elect the different bodies, and all of that goes into the process, it was a bit overwhelming. Yeah. And there were a lot of things that, even as someone who has encountered this before, I didn't fully understand.
Yeah. I remember in the office, we had two attorneys literally around the table trying to understand Section 14.
Yeah, like, does it actually mean that we can't do it? Or does it mean that, but wait, we have to look at this specific word here?
And when going back to the sections, it's a monster,
yeah.
I must say, but this is it. More discussion needs to be had, robust dialogue with the public, because ultimately it will go to a referendum.
Yes.
And, the amendment which I spoke to earlier, which is to, make Section 49 easier for more protections to be put in the Constitution. You have to acknowledge the work that was done before, and the willingness of the Minister, Marlene Mallow Fort, to make these provisions work.
Yeah.
It is to be commended, certainly. Yeah. So, anything else before we close out?
I don't think so.
Okay. You know how we stay. We're going right up to 2:00.
Yes, I know how you are, Miss Jackson.
The Access to Information Act. We had. Did we mention our little outing? Did we?
I think
we did.
I think we mentioned it last week. Yes, that we were in Mandela Park with the ATI unit. Yes, but what I will say though is that, we just went through the election period, and soon we will have many questions related to whether or not we're seeing the promises that were made being kept. And our ATI process can definitely help us to answer those questions. So,
but in the meanwhile, we do have a website.
Yes.
righttoknowja.com.
Yes.
So that's righttoknowja.com. Just want to encourage the public to utilize that portal. We got the information from the ATI unit. So in other words, you can go on that portal and make your ATI request, make your submission very, very easy. So you go on and you indicate what exactly you want to know. So if you want to hear about the new program, how well it's doing, some concerns that people had about cost, and which routes, you have it. That's for like the rural bus system. Very good system. This saw it being rolled out this morning. You can go on, click, and select the ministry, and it goes straight there.
Yes.
If you want to hear about the cost, that, about things in the Ministry of Health, the same thing. Ministry of Local Government, same process. So please utilize that web portal. That's righttoknowja.com. All right. Exercise your right to seek and receive information.
Well, that's the part of it you're exercising.
Yes. And then if you want, when you get the information,
you can disseminate.
You can go and disseminate accordingly.
So just to say, we did get a winner for a trivia question on Instagram, Moya. The trivia question was which legislation allows for the election of the House of Representatives and which date was it put in place. The legislation is the Representation of the People Act, and the date is the 20th of November 1944. So Maya, we will respond to you via DM, but you did win a voucher, so you'll have to come down to the Nationwide office at Bradley Avenue to collect it.
And you'll learn these things in social studies. But again, civics in Jamaica needs strengthening.
Absolutely.
You shouldn't have to be doing CSEC to be knowing these things, or wait until you go to university or doing sociology at Cape.
Yeah.
All right, so that's where we have to leave it today. Very, very good program, and we appreciate our listeners. My name is Michael Jackson.
And I'm Jade Williams.
Have a good week.
Jamaicans, by justice, the people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. Class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org.
The people's champion.
As of June 1, Jamaica's minimum wage is now $16,000 per 40-hour workweek, up 158% from 2016, marking the highest minimum wage in the nation's history. We are building Jamaica.
The time by the office of the Prime Minister is
2:00.
This is the World Championships. Athletes